Afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Generosity Workshop series. My name is Christy Mora, and I'm on the team here at Generis. I'm going to go ahead and ask my host of today's workshop to go ahead and come off camera as we get started. So, hey, Jim. So, guys, we have arrived at our sixth and final workshop in our series. And in this series, we have covered everything from cryptocurrency, engaging with all levels of givers, uncovering lids of generosity, and so much more. If you have not been able to participate in all of the workshops, no worries. At the end of today's workshop, I'll share details of how you can access the recording of those sessions. And for today, our final session today will not disappoint. Jim Sheppard, Julie Bullock, and Dave Lopez have prepared a roundtable discussion around the state of generosity. This session will be jam-packed with practical, great content. And I know because I totally snuck a peek at their notes. So make sure to snooze your notifications, take out a notepad, your notes app, whatever you use to take notes, and get ready. And before we get started with our presentation, I'm going to do some housekeeping. And if you've been here, you know I'm going to tell you that after this workshop, I'm going to go ahead and send you a follow-up email with the recording of this workshop and any resources that are cited during the presentation. And we'll have a Q&A session after our session. So be sure to drop your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom. And you're welcome to use the chat to introduce yourself, let us know where you're tuning in from. And before we get started, we actually have two quick poll questions, and this will kind of help us understand where you are in your generosity strategy and your year-end giving strategy. So the first poll, I'm going to go ahead and launch it. Here we go. Do you have any major projects or initiatives going on right now that may require additional generosity? All right. We'll leave this up just for a couple moments longer. You see we have about 60% participation in our poll. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and see. And let's share the results. Here we go. So the greatest one, I'm sorry, I'm looking at all of them like they're pretty even, but we have some things on hold because of COVID or other reasons. That seems to be the prevailing response here, followed by no major projects or initiatives coming up. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and let's launch that second one. This one is focused around your generosity strategy. Here we go. How confident do you feel in your generosity strategy going into the fall and year end, which, can you believe it? It's September next week. All right.
Remind them that these are anonymous responses, Christy. We don't know who said what here.
These are anonymous responses. I'm just looking at a percentage, little numbers, no names, no worries.
I'm looking at number 4 and thinking there's somebody out there who says yes, but I'm not sure I want to confess to that.
Don't worry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Stay on this webinar. Don't worry.
If you said number 4, you came to the right place today.
Yeah. All right. Let me go ahead and share this poll. All right.
See, I told you we had some takers. I knew we had some out there. That's good. You came to the right place. Congratulations. The not sures and the shakies, you absolutely came to the right place.
That is true.
And the other 2 groups as well. The other 11 of you, you're going to pick up some stuff too. I promise you.
Yes. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you, Jim. And I will see everyone at the end of the workshop. Again, don't forget to drop your questions in that Q&A feature at the bottom.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting about question number 1, Christy, was that 70% of the people are in some kind of an initiative or has put it on hold or haven't. Only 30% said we don't have anything right now. So I think that we've got the right audience here today, just knowing what we're planning to cover here today. I think it's going to be a really good session for them. So let's bring in our two guests today, David Lopez and Julie Bullock. These two are strategists on our team, really, really savvy people, both with significant church experience. Both of them have served on staff of fairly large churches. Julie in Chicagoland, a community Christian church, and then Dave at Christ Fellowship in Miami. And so they bring both church staff experience and a number of years having worked with churches. And I just thought, as Julie and Dave and I, and particularly Christy and I, we mapped out this series, you're like, who on our team could we bring in? And we have so many. I mean, we could bring in 30 people, frankly, on this panel, but we only have an hour and 10 minutes and we only have one microphone. So we picked two, and we picked them really because of the combination of consulting and church staff experience, because many of you are on church staff. And so we want somebody that we know has sat at the desk, has sat in the shoes and had to navigate the space that you're navigating. They've never had to navigate it in COVID. They both exited church staff before COVID, but they have had to consult with a lot of clients during COVID. So Julie, Dave, thanks so much for taking time today and jumping in on this. And I think we've got a good time planned for them, especially looking at those responses. I think we got the right people in the room, what they're looking for today. So let's dive right in. I mean, our first question that the three of us talked about, what are we hearing right now? We're out there and about and in a whole bunch of different churches. What are we hearing right now? Dave, let's start with you, and then Julie, you can jump in after Dave.
Well, thanks, Jim. And Julie, it's great to be with you. Christy and Jim, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And Jim, I want to affirm what you said. We have an incredible team. Any of them could have and should have been here. So thanks for the opportunity to share. I think for many, it's been a very positive season. But I think, and Julie, I want you to address that because I know that's one of the things we talked about. One of the things that I am kind of seeing and hearing is there's a fair amount of churches that made it through kind of in that neutral space when it comes to giving. Their giving didn't really go up and it didn't go down. To their surprise, it kind of just held steady, and it was praise God, hallelujah. In my conversations over the last few kind of weeks and months, just kind of coming through this summer season, it varies state by state. But one of the things that I have seen is that everybody who was kind of in that neutral place, the summer slump has affected some of their giving, in part because people are traveling a little bit more. And one of the things that I've seen, at least in my conversations, is that sense of urgency is starting to diminish. And with so many moving variables, both in our country and all over the world, there seems to be clearer need in other parts. And so monies are being redirected. So for some of the folks that defaulted to business as usual pre-COVID, like, hey, we're just going to ride this bad boy out and continue, we're starting to see a little bit of move in a direction that's not so favorable to them. Again, that's not for all churches. It's for some of the conversations that I'm having, but it's one of the things that I'm observing coming out of summer at COVID-21. That's what I'm seeing.
That's great, Dave. No, it's such a interesting question of, when you say, what are we hearing right now? Because the way I would have answered this probably a month ago is even a little bit different than how I would answer it right now, like literally right now. But I would say by and large, if I do take a little bit of a, not like a literal right now, and maybe a little bit of a broader, hey, in the last few months, kind of what's been experiencing, I shared with Dave and Jim the other day that, and you guys know this, I mean, there is on the very positive side, this is my 13th year at Generis, and this will be the busiest fall personally that my clients have ever had in campaign world. And so that's a very encouraging sign that there is a group of churches. I realize it's not everyone. And some of you on this call are saying, I can't even dream about doing a campaign right now. We just went back to in-person services. Dave made the comment, and he's right. It is very different in every part of the country. We don't need to say that enough. But I want to encourage us that there are some really encouraging results happening. We had some people, start giving initiatives, kind of last year and even into this year. And I'd say what I'm generally sensing is an optimism. There's been healthy giving. There are a lot of churches that didn't need, I'd say the majority probably didn't need their PPP funds. So kind of something that you're seeing is maybe more money in the bank than ever before. Also because there wasn't a lot of utility expenditures, maybe depending on how long your facilities were closed for. So that's creating some opportunity conversations of what people might, might be doing in that regard. So there is a batch of churches, and it's probably a large one that they're very, very, very optimistic. I would say the other thing that we're seeing right now, though, and if I speak in the right now, is there is, kind of a hesitation, and there's a split between churches of how they're kind of responding to this most recent kind of COVID wave. And there's either like an unwavering resolve, or there's kind of like okay, I want to pull back because let's just maybe we need to just wait a little bit longer before we hit the gas. And so it's just like anything else. There's obviously a wide swath, but I just want to encourage you, because sometimes we can get stuck in our own context on either end of that spectrum. So there's some of you who are blowing and going and you can't even relate to the guys that just opened last week or something. And then there's others of you that just opened last week, or you've been shut down or whatever, and you can't relate whenever I say somebody started a campaign of you can't relate to that. So I share that with you because sometimes we do get kind of stuck, especially in this super divided season where everybody's experiencing things differently. We get kind of stuck in just what we're doing or what our state or our community is doing. And sometimes it's really inspiring and helpful, and even just kind of grounding to help see what God's doing across other areas of the country, sometimes to help us. So that's kind of what I'm seeing in just a broad sense, Jim, if I just speak kind of broadly about that.
That's good stuff. I think for me, mine's going to be kind of a 10,000 foot view kind of observation of, I like to ask my clients, whether they're current clients or whether they're clients that are coming or in fulfillment or whatever, or maybe just new conversations. This question, Pastor, if I had asked you to project in April 1st of 2020, where your giving would be in the middle of the summer of 2021, would you have predicted that it would be where it is today? And almost to a person, the answer is no. They would have under projected it. They said we would not have been turned out as well as we could. And so I asked them, I said, are you surprised by that? And many of them will hesitate for a second, and then they'll say, no, my people are just responding to God, and I shouldn't be surprised by that, right? So, and I love hearing that from leaders, because I think that is what we would say, is that this is a spiritual exercise. It's not a financial exercise for many of our people. And I won't go deep into this, but I mean, there's a story from 10 years ago. Julie and Dave, you've heard me say this, where Nancy said to me, Jim, you know how to give in times of plenty. You don't know how to give in times when times are lean. And when times are lean, the challenge spiritually is bigger than even when it's good. And so I think those who see it that way do well. But then if I look, just being a numbers guy, I am seeing a lot of churches that are fitting into the category. Our giving is good, but some of it is because we've had some people who've stepped up. We don't have quite as many donors, givers as we did a year ago. Not way off, but maybe it's 10 or 12%, but maybe we're up 3% on money or 5%. And I think that's not a major concern for us, but it ought to just be a blinking caution light in the road for us to say, that's not sustainable long-term, and let's begin now to think about what it takes to fix it. So that's what I'd like for us to kind of think through. I mean, based on what you're seeing right now out there, do you think there are any implications for the future and some of the things that you're observing? Julie, we'll come to you first, and then Dave second on that. So, if I'm sitting in the church leadership's seat, what do I need to be thinking about right now in terms of the implications of that?
Yeah, I do think that because everybody's in a different life cycle, that poll at the beginning was so helpful. Jim, I appreciate that you did that, because I think that most of you are probably thinking about the next thing, whatever that is. It might not be bricks and mortar related. It might be you're launching a new location. Maybe it's staffing related. Maybe it's mission related. I mean, it's all mission. It's all mission. Maybe it is overseas related or church planting related. But you're usually always thinking about the next thing and moving the mission forward. And, I think what we've seen in this season, and what I would encourage you to be thinking about, to answer Jim's question specifically, is that, there is there's an opportunity that we have right now, obviously, to keep the mission moving forward. But there's also just such an opportunity. We see examples all over scripture that every time God wants to do something through us, he seeks to do something in us. And so there's just, and I know that's like preaching to the choir of what's happened this last year, but specifically on the topic of generosity is what I'm talking about right now. And so even if, I understand if you've got a building project that's on hold that you were going to expand your auditorium, it's probably wise that maybe you're like, I don't know if we need to do that right now, depending on your context. Some people in some areas of the country right now are blowing and going. But my point is, don't go into the sake of a building campaign just to do that. But you might find yourself saying, how's God wanting us to advance the mission forward? And let us not sit on our laurels just because we're not going to build this building, just because we maybe weren't going to do what we thought we were going to do. Is there something that God is calling us into that we don't want to wait, for perfect conditions to come? And just that listening process of, is this an opportunity for our people to grow? Because that's what you miss out on when you put projects on hold, is sometimes you're putting your people on hold for their growth. And that doesn't always necessarily have to be the case. And so I know some of you are probably doing that. You're getting creative and thinking about, okay, if that's not how we're supposed to move the mission forward right now, maybe it looks different. How are we? We don't want to be stagnant. We don't want to just wait around because, even if COVID waves go up or down or whatever, there's always going to be something that could prevent us from moving the mission forward. And we don't want to ever let that happen. So while it might look different, how is God calling us to move forward? And not just for the purpose of mission advancement, but for the purpose of the discipleship of our people. Our people need these moments where God does something through us, because they need God to do something in them. We don't want to cause our people to be stagnant. So moments of rallying like that are incredibly catalytic to personal growth, even in generosity.
Dave, how about you?
Julie, that's so good. I'm taking notes. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Jim, one of the things that I would mention on the matter of from pastor to pastor, it's not, oh my gosh, but blinking lights. Listen, so it's a blinking lights from a discipling perspective for sure. Church leader, make no mistake that when your people give or when they don't, there is a measure of spiritual engagement that the people within your congregation are demonstrating. And what's fascinating is during COVID, like when the lockdowns happened, the only tangible spiritual discipline that you and I could measure from the computer or the database was, are people giving? It doesn't matter how many people logged in to view the Sunday morning experience, whatever that may have been. There was no way to say, oh, there was 200 or 5,000. We had 23 views. Well, what does that mean? Honestly, I still don't know what that means. But when people engage financially, I know that it means something. And I also know that when people stop engaging financially, it means something. And so I would encourage all of us to view our existing givers as, wow, okay, there's opportunities to continue to move with them, affirm them, thank them, and grow them. But when someone does step out, and Jim, you alluded to the fact that giving is kind of held or it's gone up, but our total amount of givers has gone down, that means something. Something's happening here, something's happening here. Either they've disengaged with the church, they're frustrated with the church, there's been some type of life event that's happened, COVID, sickness, divorce, move. All of these are pastoral issues in nature, and they're all opportunities for you as church leaders to engage with them. Hey, is everything okay? Why are you calling? Hey, giving has changed. And when it does, it normally means something in your life has changed. I don't care about the money. I care about you, what's going on. So I think that's something for us to keep tabs on. The other thing that I would just kind of throw out there for ongoing development of the church, when givers go away, I hate to say this, but they don't get replenished very quickly. And so every church leader in this place is struggling with volunteers and small group leaders, Sunday school directors, and all of that. When we have a giver or a donor step away, a future development for givers, that amount diminishes. So it's not all apples and oranges even. It just takes a lot of time to develop those folks. And so keep an eye on that, because, for their well-being, and then for the well-being of the church and the organization into the future, the blinking lights are blinking for a reason.
When so many of our clients were not meeting in person, Dave, to your point, I would would really especially call attention to their new givers. And I would say, think about that. You just have a first-time giver, gave $250. They've never set foot on your campus. Think about that, Pastor. And the light would come on from the light. Yeah, we thought you had to come onto the front. No, you don't have to do that anymore. So just think in terms of that and rejoice with that, and then follow up with them, obviously, and kind of welcome them to the flock. So good stuff, guys.
To that
Go ahead,
point,
Dave.
Jim, like when someone does give for the first time, whether they're on campus or not, like if I came on to the church and I raised my hand to make a profession of faith, like there's a follow-up for me.
Yeah.
Or if I check my kids into the kids area for the first time, there's a follow-up for me. People don't realize, but when I give for the first time, it's like, hey, I'm not hiding. I want you to know that I've given, because I'm providing you all of the sensitive information that Walmart and Target wish they had. What are you going to do to follow up and engage with me? Because I know what all of those consumer organizations are going to do, but if we don't, I mean, we're missing out on some incredible opportunity.
Yeah. It's good stuff right there. Good stuff. Hey, so let's move on. Let's hit the idea of, Julie, you raised it, campaigns. Maybe I'm sitting out there in this season and I'm wondering, is anybody even doing campaigns this season? I mean, I'm thinking about one, but am I nuts for even thinking about this? Dave, start us off there, and then Julie, you come in behind Dave.
Okay, so the answer is absolutely people are doing campaigns. I know I didn't lead with that, but they are. I'm working with a handful of churches right now that are having conversations about finding a permanent home. I know that many of our mobile churches or church plants, wherever you might be, this is an incredible time to find like real estate or commercial spaces to be able to land for a 5-10 year lease, because there's so much vacancy out there. I think that's one of the things that's energized many of the churches that I'm working with in that space, because, hey, there's never been a better time. Mortgage rates are down. This is a fantastic time just pragmatically to be able to move in. But the other interesting thing about some of the capital campaigns that I'm working with is it's almost been like a rallying cry moment. Like, hey, I know we're out there somewhere, and I know some of us are in here somewhere. And then there's the hybrid version of we're all here in our own way, but we're going to move forward together in this new direction, in this new season that no one's ever been a part of. And your engagement is going to be critical to making that happen. So one of the beautiful things that I think we've known, but it's materializing itself beautifully in this season is, man, people are really gravitating to unifying campaigns or like vision-driven initiatives where we're going to charge this next hill. And you know what? We were made for moments like these. The church was. And we're going to storm the beach. We're going to take it. And it's going to be powerful. And we're going to get set up for the next 100 years until either Jesus comes back or the next pandemic hits us. But I mean, there are churches that are moving that way. They've got clarity of vision. They've got confidence in Christ. They've got clear direction, and I think powerful appeals to the people to invite them to be a part of stuff. So I don't want to say that all of the clients that I'm working with are doing that, but many of them are, and many of them are gearing up for powerful falls, and I think even powerful springs as well in 22.
No, it's great. What Dave really said right there, I just want to piggyback off of is the unifying power of a season of alignment. Like what a giving initiative, can do. And they're definitely, kind of as we were sharing earlier, there's innovations that have come from this season in all kinds of arenas. There's been innovations in campaigns that have come in this season, and churches that have been able to engage their people, drive through commitment Sundays and online, celebration Sundays, but even those that are meeting in person, just the opportunity, which is most, the opportunity to be able to have this unifying rally cry, because like Jim said earlier, there are less people doing more of the giving. I think almost every church we work with right now, almost every single one there are less giving units. They are doing more of the giving. And so even the churches that either most who've stayed strong in their giving or have gone up, it's with a drastically lower number of households. So my point on that is the people that are with you, and it's an opportunity, to be able to grow forward. So, as I mentioned earlier, there definitely was like a, kind of a hiatus for a while of kind of, I think everybody, what's going to happen, what's this going to mean? But I feel like there's just a resurgence, regardless of even, I mean, we've got a lot of West Coast people that have, maybe were a little bit later to reopen, than some other parts of the country. They're getting going on stuff, and they're saying, we don't want to wait around. And it might not even be capital projects. It's not even just really about that. It's about moving the mission forward, rallying your people. And it's about this whole in and through, giving from, giving to. And so it's just about what is it that God wants to do in us as he does something through us. And that's been one of the most powerful things, I think, that's not only unified people, but honestly, to be quite honest, people want something to kind of believe in and invest in right now. I think people are tired of hearing negativity. They're tired of allowing the situation of the world to hold them back. And I think it's really freeing when a church doesn't allow that to happen and takes proactive steps forward. So I know everybody probably listening has very, very, very different situation, and maybe there are some limiting factors where this isn't a season for you to rally cry your people. There might be some real divisiveness that you're experiencing. And I think a lot of churches are experiencing divisiveness. And so you might say, I need to get through some of that first before I do a rally cry. Boy, do I get that. But that notion of just the benefits that can come from a unifying season, we're seeing more and more of it as we go into the fall. And even into next year. So it's very encouraging just for the big C local church. I think, for a pastor to hear, oh, really, that pastor's, well, that encourages me. And, for some that maybe have not been in that zone. So just that point about the rally cry, obviously being sensitive to the different seasons that you have, but we're seeing some real success by the grace of God from some churches. And to Jim's point, some of it is expanding their giving basis, because there's nothing that ignites, new givers and existing givers like a focused season of giving. And that's all a giving initiative is. So very encouraging things that we are seeing out there.
Yeah, and I think what I want to say here, Julie, over the top of what you and Dave said, I think there's a big idea in there that I think everybody heard it, but I just want to say it out loud and make sure everybody heard it. That when we do capital campaigns, whether it be our traditional approach or our one fund approach, it is not primarily to raise money for your church. It is primarily to take your people through an encounter with God over their money and possessions and to spiritually develop them. The after effect of that is that what you're doing at the local church level gets funded, right? And to us, we're cognizant of both. We think it makes a difference in which one you put first. And we see this as a God encounter with your people over their money and possessions. And most people are avoiding that. And so a campaign becomes this direct confrontation with God to grow in an area where you're typically not as strong. And so that's the big idea. We want you to hear that's what we want to say to you here today. Well, Julie, you talked. You keep bringing up topics. It's that are kind of in the talking points. You brought up C, campaigns. You brought up I, innovation. So March 2020, you either were already innovating or you got forced to innovate. Either you had online worship or you had to figure out online worship really quick. And in our lane, the lane that we live in the most, you either had online giving or you had to get there really quickly. What are you seeing out there in online giving today, and kind of maybe the shift that's happened if you see that since March of 2020? And then Dave, you jump in behind Julie here.
Yeah, that's great, Jim. Well, obviously what's really interesting is, a lot of churches, I'd say the majority of churches were already there, but maybe their, percentage was, they were at 60% of their, church was giving online. Now they're at 90%, And what's incredible, obviously, is we're increasing the modes, of accessibility of the modes of how people can give. Because the caveat with this that we always need to be real careful with, because now there's such a benefit of, we don't see the summer slump anymore, because now we've got everybody on recurring online giving and they don't have to be in person. And a lot of churches didn't experience the summer slump because in giving because of that online. But as we look longer term, there is always a caution. Online giving is not the end all be all of tools. Sometimes we act like it is. It really isn't. It is a tool to help facilitate a discipline of giving. And for some people, it's an essential tool, because without it, they'd be very undisciplined and they'd be very sporadic. But for other people, it's a crutch. And auto draft becomes autopilot. And so it's this very helpful tool to bring the sporadic or occasional giver to a disciplined giver. But it's also a cautionary tool where we've got a lot of people kind of maybe giving online or giving in a recurring fashion. Just because you're giving online doesn't mean you're on a recurring schedule, but I know a lot of people are. And that's what a lot of churches try to push. And there's a very healthy, we always have to think about the why. Why would somebody want to do that? It's because that there's a discipline reason not being exercised in another form. Many people are exercising that through checks just fine. You don't need to touch that. That's great. Praise the Lord for their discipline. But there's other people that they need that type of mode, that increases their ability to be disciplined. But the danger in this, the danger and the prevalence of so much of digital giving is the churches that now have said, we don't have an offering moment anymore. And because we're not passing anything anymore. And so the churches that have been maybe doing online giving for longer at a more prevalent sense have figured some of this out. But a lot of these churches are just now figuring out, no, this doesn't mean that you don't have an offering moment in your service. Actually, it almost means the opposite. In lieu of a physical receptacle being passed, you almost need to be more intentional about these teaching moments that you would do each week, even if brief, to make sure people know the why behind this giving action. Because there is both a stagnancy, a complacency that could happen if I just set myself into auto draft and never talk about it. And so never think about it. We need those giving moments to pull people out of that into areas of first fruits theology and surrendered giving and eternal perspective. And we also need that on-ramp of people constantly. You know, one of the big arguments for passing a receptacle is that it onboards your new givers who drop a 20 every now and then. And so we still need to be addressing that on-ramping as well, even if your church, like I know most and many, have gone to not passing anything anymore. We cannot lose the sacredness of worship through our giving, and that's a part of our worship service, even if there's no physical things being passed, that intentionality. And so those are just a couple of the things that I'm starting to see in that realm. Obviously, we could speak about vendors, don't need to go into that. We can always talk with you offline if you need recommendations of vendors. We have several that we love and recommend that are really great. But I will say that's even caused a lot of them to get better at what they do because of the volume of people. But from a theological perspective, that's what I want to encourage us in, is the mode is not the end all be all. This is an incredibly powerful mode, but we have to have the why behind why you'd want to use that mode, and possibly even the why of why some people should get out of that mode or have more intentionality with that mode. That's all I'll say about that.
Dave, jump in here with a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you, Julie. I'm like typing away. That's crazy. You know, some of the things that I've just kind of observed through the season. So I'm not going to say more on the why behind the mode. I did want to kind of transition to the mode though, because one of the things that I'm finding is there was a slow adopter group, a significant amount of churches that were very antithetical to online giving. That's of the devil, or no way, that's totally goes against worship and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, when everyone was forced to give online, it was praise God for online giving. One of the fascinating things that I've seen is everyone made the transition, and everyone realized it's not that bad. Apparently it's not against the Lord, right? Like the Lord's okay with this kind of thing. But where I've seen some really cool innovation is, all right, so like the offshoots of online giving, having conversations with people that, hey, we have online giving, but we also have included text to give options. Okay, that's cool. But then, man, Jim, I saw some guys like using Venmo and Cash App, and I was thinking, wait, but is that like, are you allowed to do that? Like, are you getting tax exemption for, like, no, but we've created these other on-ramps for people to give. So it tells us who's giving. It provides clear data for us to be able to engage with new donors. But here's what's fascinating about some of those options. It's describing who is giving. And I think the who is determining how we communicate about giving and how we engage with that audience. Like if you see a significant amount of folks giving through the different kinds of avenues that aren't traditional, and today I would say online giving is a traditional form of giving, it's telling you about who's coming to your church. That should inform the way that you engage either the community or the way that you engage with the language for your offering moment, or even the things that you celebrate and how you celebrate with them. They may be a lot more tech savvy than we think, or maybe we've got to catch up and see how to better communicate either through digital or through print or whatever means we're going to use, because the how they engage, the mode, is very indicative of who's there. And I think if we're not paying attention to those things, a lot of these folks are going to move really quick. But I really think they're giving us a little bit of insight as to how we might be able to better engage with them holistically, not just through giving channels, but again, their giving is an on-ramp to engaging to the rest of the life of the church. If we don't know who they are, then we don't know how to engage them. But I think how they engage is informing who might be there. So to me, that's just kind of been like a light bulb type of thing throughout the last year.
And that's such a great point, Dave, because as people are not in the room, we need some indicators, some directional pointers to tell us who they are. I can't see Jim's face, but I see his behavior, and that tells me a lot about who he is. And then I can begin to react to that in other ways inside the ministry. That's good learning there. I love that. Hey, so we want to give time for questions and answers. We'd love to talk to you guys about some of the stuff that's on your mind. So there's a Q&A feature, and I think if you'll jump in there, I think Christy is already encouraging you. We're going to take another 7 or 8 minutes and cover just a little bit more ground here, and then give some time to respond to what you want us to talk about there. So I want to talk about some of our, and there are different terminologies for this, higher capacity givers, our financially blessed, our financial leaders. In every church, there's a group of people that just, for whatever reason, providential, sovereign, they're just really savvy, whatever you want to ascribe that to, they just have more money than others. And every church needs those as a part of their support base. And so it's important that we pay attention to them, not to the exclusion of others, and we don't elevate them above anyone else. But as we think through that, Dave and Julie, what are you seeing? We could probably do a whole seminar on this. So let's take 7 or 8 minutes and kind of wrap up our comments here. What are we seeing with some of the larger givers? So tax laws, obviously the extension of the CARES Act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act this year allows people to give up to 100% of their adjusted gross income, which might incentivize some donor behavior. What are you seeing out there? And how do we respond? How do we think that that applies? Dave, just take the lead, and then Julie jump in there.
Thanks, Jim. Listen, I'll let you speak more to the CARES Act, because I think, man, I've learned so much from you already, and I think you're like the godfather in that space. Here's what I'll say to this, and I want to be very cautious with how I say this, because it's sensitive. The fact is that right now we are in a very sensitive time of life. There's a lot of changes in people's homes and people's lifestyles and in people's futures. In terms of financial leaders, and engaging them in terms of like making larger gifts or leaving larger gifts to the church, I'll tell you, a lot of them are thinking about end of life type of stuff, because we are living in a very, very weird time of life, and the optics of security is gone for everybody, and it doesn't seem to matter how much you have. No one can tell me that tomorrow is coming for sure. And so I think it's a very special and unique time to be able to have those kinds of conversations. But I also need to say that with a caveat. If you don't know who folks are, you don't have permission to have that conversation with them. So church pastor, church leader, just realize and recognize that there is a group of people within your congregation that, whether they have a t-shirt or a cap that says I'm part of this team, they're part of the financial team. They do some of the heavy lifting, whether they realize it or not, or whether you realize it or not, they're there. So I want to encourage you, just from a pastoral perspective, to build a relationship with them, get to know them. I will tell you the opportunity is there. And just so you know, their universities are asking them today like never before. And the local pregnancy center and the Boy Scouts and your favorite nonprofit is asking them like never before, because they have a relationship established. We're all in this moment, and they're coming to you, pastor, to find spiritual authority in their lives. They don't want to mess things up. They want to do things right. And I promise you, they live with a level of fear, like you and many people in the world too, because they don't know what's going to happen. I do think the opportunity for inviting these people to partner with the church and to be like major lifters today and into the future, it's there if the relationship is there and the permission to ask is there. That's what I've seen. I've had a few of these conversations personally myself, even within my own congregation. Because the relationship is there, we've seen some really interesting things develop because of it.
That's great, Dave. Well, yeah. So and really want to affirm everything Dave just said. And just to add to that, this question about what are we kind of seeing about in the realm of high capacity givers, Jim did mention the CARES Act, which is the ability, he stated it, real clearly, could expand on it if needed. But what that's going to basically potentially incentivize is some of our stored asset givers, or those givers that are giving probably from some resources that are not just their income, because it means that you can give up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. You could do that last year. You're able to do it again this year. But we are seeing across the board probably larger gifts than in a normal year. We're starting to see some of that. Here's a couple of interesting phenomenons with that. I mean, I think, with the real estate kind of bubble in some areas of the country, maybe in a lot of areas of the country, there's some liquidating of assets and transferring into some charitable trusts. And so it's a very interesting time for real estate gifts as it relates to charitable gifts. So if your church doesn't have a plan for those types of more complex gifts, or if you don't work with one of those vendors, that might be something to consider. We're glad to help connect you with some of those strategies, but we're seeing some of those types of complex gifts. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of right now is people liquidating assets for charitable purposes into donor advised funds. Some of you may be very familiar with that tool is, but basically because of some of the maybe potential, anytime there's a new administration, there's always potential for new tax laws and things like that. And so I know there are some folks that maybe are worried about capital gains taxes going up. And so we are seeing a lot of liquidating of assets in 2021 for charitable purposes, those that are charitably minded. And so sometimes they're going into charitable vehicles like a charitable remainder trust. Other times they're going into vehicles like a donor advised fund where they're not ready to distribute it to the charity yet, or not in full to their desired nonprofit organizations, or i.e. your church, but they need to liquidate it this year because they need to get the current capital gains tax rate this year. And actually, if they give it charitably, they'll avoid it regardless. But some of them, if they're giving part of the asset into some type of a charitable vehicle, and then they're still taking the gain on the other asset, if it's a divided situation, we're seeing some of that. So, and the other thing, obviously, I don't need to tell probably most of you, is not just with real estate, but it's also regarding stocks and securities, because a lot of those are at a high level right now. It's an excellent and incredibly efficient way to avoid capital gains, regardless of what tax rates are. And so we are seeing more gifts of those types. So for 2021, we're projecting it's going to be a pretty healthy giving year, like 2020 was for most churches. And so, but I would just say to encourage you, if some of those things I mentioned are not a part of your church's generosity strategy, for that category of giver that might be thinking of more complex gifts, if you don't have stock instructions on your website, if you don't even have a place where people can go to discuss complex gifts, we've got, again, great help that we even have partners with that could kind of help you set some of that up. We can help you set some of that up, but it's definitely a conversation you want to be available to your people, and it might be particularly relevant to your people in 2021. So those are just a couple of things I thought I would mention there, Jim.
Those are great comments, Julie. And for those of you who are wondering what we're referencing when we're talking about the CARES Act, and then, which was last year, Consolidated Appropriations Act extended some of the provisions of the CARES Act, including the ability for taxpayers under certain circumstances to deduct up to 100% of their adjusted gross income. And by the way, that expires in 2021, and there's no reason to believe they're going to extend this. It was just put in there for COVID to encourage charitable giving in this season. I just put a link to a pretty good article. It may have a little bit of technical language in there, but the thing I like about it is it's very accurate. It's very accurate. It's not from a news source with some bias or editorial language in there. It's just very factual about how that works. The link is right over there in the side. And then Julie mentioned, a couple of things, donor advised funds. It still to this day surprises me how many churches and how many givers in a church don't realize what a DAF is. And Julie has articulated it very well. Let's just say I have a friend. This is actually a real life example. I have a friend who's a litigator. Litigators don't get paid regularly. They get paid in large spurts. And my friend takes on very large cases. And he settled one in December 3 years ago, I think it was. And he says to me, I want to tithe, but I don't know where exactly I want it to go. And I need to get the deduction this year. That was a perfect use of our donor advised fund. He gets the current year tax deduction, and he can decide later, which he wasn't going to do it long term. He just wanted 6 months to kind of think through it, where the money actually goes. And then lastly, the old one that, again, I'm still amazed at how many people don't know how to give appreciated assets and make the tax law work for you. Neither Dave nor Julie nor I would say that you give primarily for tax benefits, but we would say be good stewards and know how to use the tax law to maximize your giving to the organizations that you want to support, obviously including your local church there. So hopefully that is helpful. Hey, let's pause. We got one more thing we want to cover right near the end, and that's to tee up the idea of year-end giving. So Dave and Julie, hold your thoughts on year-end giving. Let's take a few questions and let's see if we can answer some of the things that are out there. I've got a couple of them over here in the Q&A. How much effort to spend on lapsed givers? I love this question. Based on behavior, they're not attending, not volunteering, not around, not giving. Seems like a pastoral care issue, not a giving issue, as was mentioned earlier. I think you flagged it, but let's just add in maybe a couple of thoughts here. Dave, tee us off, and then Julie finish up, and we'll go to another question after that.
Sure. So great question. Here's one of the things that I would consider. Is it somebody that you know that's been a consistent part of the church prior to COVID or over the last couple of years? Have they been regular and consistent in their stewardship towards the church? Or is it the guy who shows up once a year and gives $20 because the pastor said something funny? Maybe he dropped $20 because his mom has COVID and he wants it. Like, people give for all sorts of weird reasons. What I would say is, if somebody was a regular volunteer in your kids' ministry and they dropped off the face of the earth, what would our response be for them? Whatever the answer is to that, I would encourage you to view like your regular giver who dropped off that way. If you have a first-time guest who shows up, what's the right appropriate response to engage with them? If you have like a one-off giver that hasn't engaged ever, but gave one time, what's an appropriate first-time giver response look like in your church? We know that churches are kind of all over the place, but first-time giver, I would start with a phone call, because it's almost like a first-time guest. Hey, I came, I showed up. Does anybody know I'm here? And it's not with, hey, Julie, thanks for your $23.46. That was awesome. It's never that. It's always a conversation of, Julie, listen, our team shared with me that you guys gave for the first time. That's incredible. Nobody gives money away by accident. Tell me, what in the world led you to give to Cornerstone Miami or whatever church you're a part of, right? Because I don't want to know, I don't care. For a first-time giver, the amount means nothing. It's all here, right? Like, what's happening here and what's happening here, because no one gives anything away by accident. So those are kind of the handles that I would maybe throw out there to kind of use for lapse giving follow-up.
Yeah, it's great, Dave. Yeah, the lapse giver conversation, it's so dicey. And here's what I would say is that it is going to be directly based on whether or not you have an accountability or relationship with that person as to how specific you can be. So I'll give you for example. There are some people that you've had, because with expectations, you can have accountability. Without expectations, it's really hard to hold people accountable. So my point on that is there are certain groups of people, like maybe staff or elders in some churches, even group leaders, that you have explicitly said that there is a leadership expectation for them to give, or to give regularly or give consistently. And so if you see that behavior not happening, you've created that expectation. And then it allows you to be able to then follow up with accountability in a healthy way. For a regular attender that you've probably said from the pulpit or from the stage, we want you, or maybe even they signed a membership covenant or something, but there's not really an accountability relationship that you have with them. Kind of like Dave said, it's not that you would ever call them up and ask where their giving is. You can't do that. We would not advise that unless you're in that type of a close discipleship relationship with them, like you would be with staff, like you would be with elders, like you potentially would be with some of your group leaders. But if you're not, it's a broader pastoral care issue. It might be a trigger to just reach out. And, a lot of times in a church, we'll give an alphabetical list, to the campus pastors or to a pastoral care team to be able to say, have you seen these people in a while? And, lapsed giver by definition means it's been 12 months since their last gift. Sometimes that's a little long. You may even want to start running some reports more on a 6-month basis, because sometimes those people are already out the door. Just to be able to say, you know what? Come to think of it, I haven't seen those people in a while. And you're not going to call them and ask them where their giving is, but it's going to prompt you to take another pastoral care action step, and just to reach out to see how they're doing. So you can mention actually the giving for people that you are in close discipleship relationships with. You should, if you're holding your staff accountable, you should have those conversations. If you've set that expectation, same with your elders, and in some church contexts, if you've even done that at a group leader level. So if that's helpful, you're exactly right. It is a pastoral care issue, but the way you handle it depends on what type of accountability or relationship you do or don't have with those people.
Stuff, guys. We've got some questions sitting over here in the sidebar. I see Julie and Dave, you've been weighing in on some of these, so let's just call them out and make sure everybody's looking at. The question came to us. Chuck asked a question: how's the best way to communicate the benefits of stock and real estate gifts? Would that be letters, face-to-face newsletter to the whole church? Julie responded very appropriately. We just think that maybe, workshops and, corporate communications on how these things can be advantageous to you would be helpful. And maybe it even goes to the bigger idea of not just, just assets in particular, but maybe your whole estate. How do you allocate assets out of your estate? And we have 2 partners that we work with regularly, Financial Planning Ministries and Philanthrocorp, that can be great friends to you in this. I mean, we have intentionally not gone deep in that area. We could, but they have lawyers and people who are very, very well versed in these transactions. And National Christian Foundation is a great partner for these types of transactions. And we think they can serve you exceedingly well. All of us as kind of practitioners, we know the general rules and the general lay of the land, but these are think of us as kind of maybe a primary care physician, and this would be a referral to someone who has a specialty even beyond what we do. And they're great friends. It does not hurt to do the publication to your church and say, hey, as we approach year end, and with the equity market being where it is, some of you may want to consider giving stock. And if you're interested in knowing how to do that, contact us. They'll reach out and have a ready document that you can give to them that explains the tax benefits of that. They're easily, you can get it online. Just go to your accountant probably even has it. So I think those can be good resources for you. There was a question that was posed over here. There's so many vendors for online and mobile giving. It is overwhelming. Can you share your top 5 and best practices? I receive requests to use QR codes, Apple Pay, Venmo, etc. Let me just jump in here on this one and offer a couple of thoughts. What I would have said 2 years ago is different than what I would say today. What I would have said 2 years ago, that almost across the board, whatever your church management system is, that is not the best giving application out there, because they were poor. But the church management system world has noticed that the third party world was better than they were, and they've innovated. And some of them have gotten to be really good. So I would say maybe take a look and see if the one that is inside your church management system works and accomplishes what you want it to accomplish. And if it does, then you probably need to look no further. It's going to be a seamless integration. There may be another bell and whistle out there that somebody else will do, but it's outside your system. They do, by the way, all the third-party vendors know how to interface through API directly with your church management system, so they can do seamless integration, but it is one more step. So I would start by making sure that your in-house church man, whoever it is that you're using, that's not your best option. If it's not, then go out and look into the marketplace. There are 3 or 4 that are the largest out there. I think you probably know who they are. We can call them out. It's PushPay, Tithely, Kindred, Subsplash are probably among the top 4. That doesn't mean they're the only 4. Every one of us has seen innovations, and even some of the smaller ones have gotten to the point that they have really good features. Let me say just one word. Don't base your decision on pricing alone. Now, pricing is a part of the consideration. Make sure, sometimes you get tempted. There's one pricing model that says, hey, Pastor Julie, we'll offer you a fixed rate. Well, the fixed rate might be or might not be good for you based on your mix of business. Credit card transactions are more expensive than debit card transactions. Debit card transactions are more expensive than ACH transactions that come straight out of your bank account. For me, I would rather do business with a provider that gives me a separate tier of pricing for credit cards, for debit cards, and for ACH. That does not mean that's the only answer. That's my preference because I like to see the transparency of what I'm being charged, and then I can evaluate whether that's the best deal for me or not. So any one of us be glad to talk with you. That's a topic we could probably do a whole hour on. That's why I just wanted to take that one right off the top, give you some advice. And if any of you want to reach out to Julie, Dave, or me, we'd be glad to go a little bit deeper with you on that conversation. I saw one down here. How to engage the online community with a typical end of year thanks. Julie, you want to start us off on that one? What would you do if you were sitting in that seat as a local church leader? How would you do that?
So how to engage the online community with a typical end of year thanks. So, not knowing, I know there's probably a wide swath on here of capabilities and even staff functions in-house as it relates to if you've got a video production team, or if you don't have a video production team, or if you've got a great graphics team that produces print pieces and digital pieces, or if you don't. I would say though, just to, if the question is specifically about engaging the digital community, that you're probably going to want to do something that would be engaging them through a digital means. Now I say that, and depending on your budget availability, we have had a lot of churches put together beautiful annual report pieces in print for a very digital age and mail them to people that have been engaging digitally. So I don't want to take that off the table. I just know when you're thinking about, is the juice worth the squeeze, from a dollars perspective, there's quite a bit that you can do with a compelling annual report video. There's quite a bit that you can do with a digital annual report without having to print, especially, and we can show you guys some great examples, but ones that are kind of interactive where you can click and you can see a video right on the digital piece. But I think one of the biggest things is, if this is specifically wondering about your online community, maybe those that have never set foot in your physical space, or who have now transitioned to being a part of that digital community. I think as much as possible, the name of the game that everybody's talking about is engagement. And I think for them to feel a part, not just of what the giving did this year, but for them to feel a part of what it is that the ministry is doing as a whole. So I do think that part of that is through digital means, but if you have the wherewithal, meaning if you have the talent and you have the budget, there are some churches doing some pretty great stuff with print right now through a digital age. And I got a beautiful piece in the mail the other day that was a printed report piece after a fiscal year of an organization that we support. And it was beautiful, and so things can be done very well through video. They can be done very well through digital means. But I think engaging those folks in a possible way by putting that out there, it probably depends a little bit on kind of the gift makeup of your team. But those are kind of three, I think, pretty good options as we're thinking about.
Great thoughts there, Julie. David, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so just jumping off of engagement, again, your online community are the folks out there. And if there's one thing everybody has mastered over the last 18 months, it's how to use Zoom or GoToMeeting or any one of these things. Listen, I'd encourage you to recognize that if you have an online audience, they're out there. Fantastic. So if they're not going to come physically, what's the place where we can meet them and spend some time relationally engaging with them? So having these kind of celebration or vision type of nights in the fall, heading into the end of the year, it's a unique opportunity first to gather people, maybe break them out into rooms, have opportunities to maybe share, get to know each other, celebrate what God's done, thank them appropriately in that place. Listen, all of you call X church your church. And I know you're part of like the future church because you're part of the online expression of what God's doing. Here's kind of where we're looking to go in 2022 in the physical locations and in the digital ones as well. Man, we want you guys to be a part of that. And that's going to mean X, Y, Z. We're just thankful for the opportunity to engage with you. And we ask that you remain, faithful to us. And you got to provide clarity what faithful looks like in a digital church. But I think relational points of engagement print, yeah, video essential. And then this kind of conversation is now normalized. So don't under leverage it, because it's huge. I can tell you some of the capital initiatives that I've been a part of. Some of the largest gifts in some of these initiatives aren't from people that have stepped foot on the campus. Sometimes it's an online viewer that, hey, I joined this church because of the lockdowns and I really have a heart for the vision and I really like what you're doing. And, my family got saved watching you online, or something happened. So don't undervalue it, because I think it's a unique opportunity that could be really, really powerful for relational engagement and for leveraging online church.
Good stuff. Well, let's see. Someone posed a question that is a great segue for us to talk just briefly about year end, and then we'll transition to Christy to wrap us up here for the day. So here's what they said, Julie and Dave. We are still online for church services, and December is our biggest giving month. Giving has stayed steady, but we do not know what to expect. What, when, and how should we communicate to our congregation? I think you touched on that a little bit, but let's just kind of if you were pointing toward year end and somebody put that on the table for you, give us a couple of ideas of what you'd say to them right here in this moment. Dave, you want to start off, and then Julie, wrap us up?
So if the church hasn't re-engaged yet, which, by the way, I want you to know, you're not alone if that's you. And that's fine. We know that there's different realities, different expressions depending on like the type of group of people that you're engaging. It's all over the place. We get it. So one of the things that I'd encourage you guys to have, chances are you've already been doing some type of Zoom gathering or some type of like engagement type of event. I'd encourage you guys to maybe reevaluate. Do we do these by teams? Do we do these by niche, by group, by age, by marriages, by singles, by students? Like, where are we already gathering, and how can maybe we repurpose some of those gatherings? If we're not cautious, we're going to over Zoom people. I know that Zoom fatigue was a real thing, and I think everyone experienced a version of that last May or June. Everybody was like, I'm done. I'm tired of seeing that guy. Nope, no more. So we want to be cautious with that. So what's already in existence and how can we repurpose it? It's always easier to join energy than it is to create it. So what would it look like to take a Zoom gathering for parents or a Zoom gathering and just celebrate, kind of cast vision for the future? Here's what we're looking at. And I think like from the heart type of moments, pastor or ministry leader, let me encourage you to have some of those kind of spelled out. Many of them, if you haven't regathered, haven't seen you physically in a long time, or if they have, it's from a distance. So there's a really unique opportunity that I think you might have to just kind of state of the union moment. Hey, here's where the church is. Here's kind of where we're looking. Good news. I mean, we've said that the church isn't a building, it's people. If you're online, you better believe that. So what does it look like to live that out in this new reality for you and your congregation? I also think leveraging other avenues of communication is going to be big. Social media becomes kind of this platform where you get to post things. So celebrate what you can celebrate, remind when you can remind, pray when you can pray, but don't underutilize all those avenues that currently exist. And then the space of digital, then I would encourage you to leverage, like Julie said, a print piece or a digital piece or a video or whatever is appropriate for your context. You've got 3.5 months or just September, October, whatever. Yeah, 3.5 months to get things going before year end. If it really is your biggest month, start pushing now, because your competition starts September 1. I was talking with the pastor last year in the middle of April, and one of the things that we were talking about was like year-end push for 2020. I said, listen, you need to get ahead of this early, because everybody who starts their big push in November is going to start really early this year. St. Jude's, all of a sudden famous people show up and they start asking for stuff. Cool. Not sure if you noticed, but St. Jude started their game early this year because they know what everybody else knows. If there's people that can give up to 100% of their adjusted gross income, we are going to go ahead and take advantage of that. I promise you, what used to start November 1 will start September 1. You're going to start to see all of these charitable entities asking, hospitals, nonprofits, whoever. And if you wait to start asking November, December, you're going to be late to the game, or you're going to get what's left, not what's best. So let me encourage you guys to get ahead on that.
Great, Dave. I love it. Yeah, as Dave mentioned, we've kind of, September is a time when a lot of people, I would call kind of like the planning phase of your year-end giving effort. Depending on what you're doing, if you are, I know some of you may have like a special project. There might be something designated that you're wanting to challenge people to give to as part of a year-end offering or Christmas offering. Others of you might just say, we just want to fuel ministry in a general sense. Both of those things are right. And regardless of what the giving to is, you can always focus on the discipleship of the giving from. And so, as you're just a couple of real practical tips as you're thinking about year end giving, it's helpful to give it a name and a theme. It doesn't have to be a multi-year campaign for it to have a name. Maybe that name is something that correlates with your Advent series that you're already doing, so you're not feeling like you're over branding it. Maybe the name of it has to do something with the giving from aspect. If you're really leaning into a certain theology of first or the theology of surrender, or some of these spiritual inputs that might be part of what you're leaning into more than a project-based initiative. Or it could be that your theme or your name goes along with what it is you're trying to give to. But I would encourage you, that will help kind of frame up a lot of your communication assets so that when you start getting into October, the scope determines the strategy, right? So if you're going after something kind of at a large scope, you might want to do, some smaller gatherings of leaders and kind of get people excited about the year end. If you'd say, no, we're not going after a big scope, we just want to evoke year end generosity, you might not need any specific meetings. You just might want to start on some of those communication assets. Are we going to run 6 weeks of video stories? Even if you're doing an Advent series, you can still run video stories of givers and of impact. But I can't say enough to how much a theme, it's more than just a brand, it's really a narrative for what that's going to look like through the end of the year. So I have one right now that we're preparing for called Hope Gives. And it's really all about this church is stepping forward in hope, but we're asking people as they give, that they would give, anticipating God to move with a hopeful spirit, with a spirit of abundance and not of scarcity. And so there's a theology behind our theme more so than that we're giving hope through what we're giving to, kind of the specific things. So sometimes in some contexts, it's appropriate to have a goal. And then obviously all of the communication assets that would go along with that. As we get into December, social media strategy. I mean, I could go real in the weeds here and I won't for time, but as we go through, kind of those last few months of December, some churches that really do have a lot of check givers. And I know many of them, I even mentioned in the chat, some of your larger givers are sometimes still giving by check. We might want to do some mailed letters in December, because that's a part of a lot of other nonprofit strategies. We want to communicate with people in the mode that they are communicating with us in giving wise. And so if that does mean that we're doing some of those assets, again, I could go real in the weeds. I think Jim or Christy's getting ready to tell you about a resource we have that goes in the weeds. But broadly speaking, like Dave mentioned, now's the time to be starting to think about those things. Love that we had that poll and the honesty on that poll. But it's time to get started thinking about that theming and thinking about, you could have a really powerful year end this year. We're predicting some really good charitable giving. Back to you, Jim.
Great thoughts from you guys. And yes, we are, to Dave's point, we are encouraging you to start earlier this year and you're thinking about year-end giving. We at Generis, we are realists, so we don't live in a land of not real, but we're also going to be glass half full, glass 2/3 full. And so our thought this year is, what if, as you begin to think through re-engagement, and I know that some of you may not be able to think in terms of this based on where you are with the COVID playing out in your community, but what if this could be one of your best year ends ever? And if you were thinking like that, then the pathway to that starts right now. And we've developed a resource for you that could be very beneficial. We've got a lot of our voices weighing in on it. This is not the typical, hey, here's a done for you resource. There's a thank you note and a year-end giving letter. And this is not that. We do have a few of those resources in there. This is much more comprehensive than that. And so, Christy, that's your segue to wrap up and take us out of here. I don't know if I could have promoted that any better than I just did, and I'm sure you'll say even more about it. So, but let me just say thank you to Dave and Julie for taking valuable time out of their day to be here. this was even better. I'm looking at the notes for the plan. This was even better than we thought it would be in the notes. And so I hope that it was helpful to all of you who joined us today.
Thank you, Jim. Team, this was great. Like, I can't think of a better way to wrap up this series. It was our very first Generosity Workshop series, and it ended on a high note. So thank you guys for the time, the effort, and just bringing together all of our collective wisdom. And I say our very loosely because it's all you guys. So as Jim said, we have a year-end giving resource, and it's nuts because we're 4 months away from the end of the year. I did that math and while you guys were talking, which is absolutely nuts. So you have to start planning now. And this year-end giving is a great opportunity to connect and engage with your givers, celebrate what your church community has accomplished in the past year, and just look towards the next year of ministry for your church. And so Jim alluded to a single resource that we are putting together, and it's called Your Best Year-End Giving Ever. And it is a multi-voiced resource that'll be coming out shortly. But what I want to go ahead and also point out is that we've created a resource bundle. So we've pulled together all of our best resources to help guide you in this year in giving season. It has free tools, templates, guides, as well as some specific year-end solutions that have been created by our Generis team. And this page will not be live until later in the week, but tomorrow in your follow-up communication, we're giving everyone on this call the initial access to that. So you'll be getting instructions of how you can get into that, and you can start downloading, joining wait lists. And what's really awesome is what you see there is not all that will be there throughout the season. We're going to keep adding stuff as we finish developing, all to help you and just guide you through this year in giving season. In the chat right now, I am going to drop some links. This is how you can connect with Generis, with all three of our speakers here, how to access the last 5 workshops, and just anything else that you'll need from us. And in that follow-up communication, I'm going to share the link of an article that Jim provided and ways to connect with everyone here. I know we had a ton of questions, and I don't want to leave them unanswered, so you'll be able to connect with everyone. And that's it. I think, look at this, 2:15 on the dot. Amazing. We did it. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who participated and joined us throughout the series and today. It's been an absolute joy to be here. All right, everyone. Bye.